I knew the ring the second I saw it. Oval-cut emerald, antique gold band, slightly worn on the underside from years of being passed down. I didn't need time to process it. I didn't need a second look. Because I was the one who put that ring on my mother's finger. The day we buried her. And now, it was on mine. Damien was still kneeling in front of me, smiling like this was the biggest moment of his life. People in the restaurant had turned to watch, some already clapping, one woman even tearing up. I felt frozen. He opened the velvet box and held it out, the candlelight catching the green of the stone just enough to make me feel sick. "Sabrina," he said softly, "you've made me believe in something again. Will you marry me?" I smiled. Not because I meant it. Not because I felt love or surprise or joy. But because I couldn't breathe. And when I nodded and whispered yes, the entire room erupted. I barely heard them. Damien slipped the ring onto my finger and kissed my hand gently, like we were in a movie. I kept thinking. How? Back at the apartment, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hand for almost an hour. He was in the kitchen, humming while he poured 2 glasses of wine. I didn't move. I barely blinked. My mother had worn that ring nearly her whole life. She'd called it a burden and a blessing. She'd asked me, begged me, to let it be buried with her. And I had. I was there. I saw it. But now, Sabrina. Damien called out. "You okay?" I looked up. "Where did you get this ring?" He walked over, handed me a glass of wine, and sat beside me. "It was in the attic. In that old cedar box your mom kept." "No, it wasn't." He laughed gently, as if I were being silly. "It was. I found it a few months ago. I thought about giving it to you then, but tonight felt right." I said nothing. Because we had gone through that attic together. Every box, every drawer, every photo. There was no ring. I remembered how carefully I had dressed her for the casket. How I'd placed that ring on her finger, right before they closed the lid. There was no way he could have found it later. So I smiled again. Pretended. But I didn't drink the wine. That night, after Damien fell asleep, I opened my closet and pulled down the box of photos and letters I'd saved after the funeral. There was a picture of my mother's hand, taken a day before she died, thin fingers, swollen knuckles, the emerald ring still resting there. She'd told me, "Don't wear it. Not yet. That ring comes with too much. Let it go with me." So I did. And now, it was back. By morning, I had called 3 cemeteries. None would speak to me without proof of family authorization. I didn't tell them why I was asking. Not yet. Even saying the words felt insane. But I wasn't crazy. I wasn't grieving anymore. And I didn't forget. So I sat down at my kitchen table, stared at the ring again, and did the only thing I could think of. I searched how to tell if a grave has been disturbed. And something inside me shifted. I used to believe that love was the safest place to hide. But suddenly I felt like I was being watched. Not by Damien. Not just by him. By the past. I didn't mention the ring again. Not that day, or the one after. Damien acted like everything was normal. He made me coffee in the mornings, left sticky notes on the fridge with little hearts and quotes like "you, me, always." I played along. But the longer I wore the ring, the more it felt wrong. Heavy. Cold. Like a stranger's hand on mine. 3 days later, I called my cousin Julia. We hadn't talked in a few weeks, not since her internship had her flying back and forth to Chicago. But Julia had been there the week of the funeral. She helped me pick out the dress Mom was buried in. She stood next to me when the casket was lowered. If anyone could help me remember what I was starting to doubt, it was her. "Do you remember the ring?" I asked, skipping any real greeting. There was a pause. "You mean your mom's emerald?" "Yeah." "What about it? Do you remember what we did with it?" She hesitated again. "Then, we buried it with her. I watched you put it on her finger." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "Why? What's going on?" I glanced at the bedroom. Damien was out running errands. I lowered my voice. Damien proposed with it. Another pause. Then Julia's voice dropped. No. That's not possible. I know. A longer silence followed. I could hear her breathing. Wait, she said. This is weird. I don't know if it means anything, but, the night before the funeral, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to make tea. Damien was sitting in his car. Just, parked in front of the house. I froze. What time? Late. Maybe 2:30, 3 a.m. He was just staring at the house, engine off, lights out. I thought it was sweet at the time, like maybe he was just grieving in his own way. I didn't answer. Because I remembered that night too. I had woken up feeling cold, walked to the window, and noticed the front gate wasn't fully closed. I had blamed the wind. But it hadn't been windy. Later that day, I asked Damien casually about that night. Were you parked outside my house before the funeral? He blinked, then laughed softly. Yeah. I was too restless to sleep. Just sat in the car, thinking about your mom. Why? I shook my head. No reason. But my stomach twisted. That evening, I pulled out the photo album again. The one from the funeral. Not many pictures, just a few people had insisted on taking some for memory. In one photo, taken right before the casket was closed, my mother's hands were visible. I zoomed in. The ring was there. Same position, same stone. I wasn't imagining it. But something else caught my eye. A scratch. Just below her left wrist. Thin, fresh-looking, unnatural. A single faint line on otherwise pale, untouched skin. I stared at it for a long time. It hadn't been there the day before. And the casket had been closed not long after that photo was taken. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up rereading texts from Damien in the weeks leading up to the funeral. One stood out. It was sent 3 days after my mother passed. If you need anything, I'll be around. Day or night. Even if you're asleep, I'll sit outside just to make sure you're okay. At the time, I thought it was romantic. Now, it felt like a confession. I didn't want to believe it. Even when the evidence started lining up, part of me kept hoping I was wrong. That I was making too much of a coincidence. That maybe grief had shifted something in my memory, and Damien really did find the ring in some forgotten box. But the problem was, he remembered everything else perfectly. Down to the brand of tea my mother liked. Down to the exact date of her last chemo. Down to the color of the roses we picked for her coffin. Everything, except how the ring got into his hands. I called the cemetery on a Thursday morning. Used my mother's name. Explained I was her daughter. I didn't mention the ring. Not yet. I just have a question, I said carefully. Has the grave ever been tampered with? There was a long pause on the other end. Then, our records show no official disturbances or exhumations. That information would be documented. Would I be notified? If it were official, yes. But, if you suspect something, you may want to contact the groundskeeper directly. I can give you his name. His name was Terry Long. I called him that afternoon. His voice was rough and slow, the kind of tone that didn't rush. When I explained who I was, he was polite, but cautious. Then I asked, has anyone been around my mother's grave outside of funeral hours? Especially in the weeks after the service. There was a pause. There was something. I didn't think much of it at the time. My grip on the phone tightened. 2 weeks after the funeral. Late evening. I saw a man standing by her plot. No flowers, no candles. Just standing there. I asked if he needed anything, and he walked off without a word. Did you get a good look at him? He hesitated again. I only remember the suit. Dark blue. No tie. Slim build. I closed my eyes. That's exactly what Damien wore to the funeral. That night, I sat in the bathroom with the ring in my hand, holding it under the bright white vanity light. I turned it slowly. There, on the inside of the band, was a tiny scratch. Not natural wear. Something sharper, newer. I slid it off and held it up against my phone's flashlight. There was something else etched inside. Almost invisible. Yours. Always. D. Not my mother's engraving. Damien's. And that told me everything I needed to know. The next morning, I asked Julia to meet me. We sat in her parked car outside a grocery store. I showed her the ring, the photo, the scratch on my mom's wrist, the groundskeeper's statement. Julia didn't say anything at first. She just kept staring at me. Then she whispered, "You think he opened the casket?" I don't know what to think. Her voice tightened. Sabrina, that's illegal. It's disgusting. You can't let him keep lying to you. I looked down at my hands. I think he did it for control. Not for love. She leaned forward. What are you going to do? I need to know how far it goes. I need to know if this was just about the ring, or if it was about her. That evening, I waited for Damien to come home. He walked in like always, carrying takeout, smiling like we were newlyweds. I asked him how his day was. He asked what I wanted to watch. We sat on the couch like nothing was wrong. Then I turned to him and said, "What was her last conversation with you about?" He blinked. "Your mother." I nodded. His smile faltered just a little. "She told me to look after you." "Did she say that before or after you opened her coffin?" He went very still. The air between us didn't move. Not for a full 10 seconds. Then, so softly I barely heard it, he said, "She said you were too alone. That someone needed to help you let go." I didn't cry. Not when Damien admitted it. Not when he said he'd gone to the cemetery late at night, bribed someone to let him say goodbye properly. Not even when he confessed he'd opened the casket, taken the ring, and kept it for the perfect moment. "It was supposed to mean something," he said. "Your mother and we talked about you. She wanted you to find someone who wouldn't leave. I wanted to prove I could be that." I looked at him. "You proved something, Damien. Just not what you think." The next morning, I packed a small suitcase. I left the ring on the counter. I didn't write a note. I didn't need to. Julia picked me up. We drove 2 hours upstate, to the same lake house where my mom used to take me every summer as a child. It smelled like old wood and pine needles. I opened the windows. I let the silence in. And I finally slept. 3 days later, I got a letter. It was from the funeral home. Inside was a copy of a note my mother had written, something the director had forgotten to give me at the time. Just one line. "The ring was never the gift, Sabrina. Knowing when to let go is." I smiled. Not because it didn't hurt, but because it finally made sense. I wasn't alone. And I wasn't his anymore.